Hey folks, it's Kathleen. I just wanted to talk you through the activity for week 3. You're welcome to just read the directions on your own, but this gives you a narrated version. So first you're going to select a television show that you're considering using for your show project. And this doesn't have to be your final selection, but it should be a show you're somewhat familiar with or interested in learning more about. You should have seen at least one episode of it, so you know you've seen it all the way through. Secondly, you need to be able to identify and be able to define the show's protagonist, antagonist, and narrative structure. So after having read chapter 2, you should have a pretty clear idea of how to describe those applying to the show that you want to talk about. Third, you're going to click the link below to answer the questions about the show. Now, I don't want this to confuse you because it's set up like a quiz, but it's not technically a quiz. It's graded in your activity portion of the gradebook. The quiz just gives you the opportunity to input answers in the ways that will present them for your grade. So when you feel you've answered the questions that are presented to the best of your ability, click Submit. I have 2 links here. The first one shows you the questions so you can start preparing those, and the second link is when you're ready to actually submit your responses. So I want to talk you through the questions real quick. If you click on this link, it takes you right to the questions. So read and prepare these questions, then go back to the activity description to click the link, or you can click here to submit your responses. I have the link in both places. First, you're going to say what the name of the show is. Then you're going to define whether it's a series or a serial. You just need to decide, is it a series or a serial? So think about that according to the definitions. Describe as best you can who the protagonist is in the show using descriptions such as his or her age, occupation, and the circumstances in which he or she lives. So, maybe they're a doctor in an emergency room, they're brand new, they haven't learned the ropes yet, that kind of description. If there are multiple protagonists, name up to 3 and define how they're different from each other. So if there's more than one, you can name 2, you can name 3, you don't need to name any more than that, but just define how their circumstances are different, even though they're all protagonists. Then describe as best you can who the antagonist is in the show using descriptions, again, same thing, age, occupation, and the circumstances. And again, if there's multiple antagonists, you can name 2 or 3 and define how they're different. Then define as best you can an enigma of the show and put it in the form of a question, because an enigma is a mystery. It's something that we always wonder as we watch the show. So here's some examples of how you can phrase that. So for a series enigma, an example might be in How I Met Your Mother. The enigma could be defined as, will Ted ever be able to convey to his kids the profound meaning of his relationships? And that's a pretty big enigma. It's one that is recurring. You see it every episode. Every episode tries to answer that question, but it never completely answers. The serial enigma could be defined, if we look at Arrested Development, will George Bluth ever be convicted of his crimes, or will George Michael and maybe ever act on their feelings? Now, Arrested Development is kind of a borderline between a series and a serial, so again, the definitions are a little fuzzy. If you can defend your definition, then that's fine. I would take either serial or series for Arrested Development, but you see what I'm saying here. So there's different ways of looking at the enigma. Again, your book gives you a lot more examples, so you can look at that to decide how you want to state that. For number 6, define as best you can how exposition is usually dealt with at the beginning of each episode in this show. So your answer should include a description of how much background is presented at the beginning of each episode and how the new episode fits into the overall enigma of the show. Again, the textbook and the examples I have in the lecture have a lot of ways of defining this. So, if you have missed a couple of episodes, how does the show help you catch up at the very beginning? So that's what you need to answer. Define how climax and resolution are usually dealt with in each episode of this show. Give examples from a specific episode of the show as to how the climax and resolution, or lack of resolution, was presented. So a series and a serial are going to be very different in the way they handle the climax and the resolution. They're going to be in different places. Serials tend to not resolve hardly at all. So they leave you hanging so that you have to tune in to the next episode, and you're going to continue with some very little exposition. So the way that exposition, climax, and resolution are handled between a series and a serial is very different, and you'll need to check your textbook to see, and then you can apply it to the show that you're talking about, and you'll see how it works. So think about it this way. Is each episode's conflict or enigma resolved? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Is there a climactic moment that happens right after the credit rolls? Or does the climax happen earlier and then there's some resolution? So there's lots of different ways of looking at it. So do the best you can. Hopefully this helped you understand the assignment a little bit better. Email me if you have any questions, and good luck.